Let's go. You lead the way. Where are we headed? Towards a net zero future, of course. Cleaner water, more electricity, a sustainable society. That's the destination we've set ourselves. This we know. Yes, we know exactly where we're going, but we need to get there quicker. So, let's build on the progress we've already made by working and walking together. With the right partners, tools and ideas, we'll become an unstoppable force. This we know. Right now, there are businesses who are putting technology and sustainability at the heart of everything they do. Brave leaders turning maybes into realities and building something better for everyone. Now is the time to look to the future and reinvent ourselves today, empowering others to do the same tomorrow. Yes, we know what the future holds, and we know how to get there. So, let's take charge of the journey today.
Welcome everyone to the session today where we will talk about the important role that digital can play in reducing industrial emissions. I'm Donna Edwards, I'm MD for Business Support and Business Finance at the Growth Company, and we have been leading the Northwest Adoption Pilot Made Smarter. I'm really excited to be the moderation for the session today, where I'll speak to leaders from both industry and government to explore what is being done today to reduce industrial emissions in manufacturing and industrial industries. We're going to go live now to Geertz Ehrhardt, who's the Senior Managing Director leading Accenture's Industry X Engineering and Manufacturing practice in Europe.
Yes, thank you, Donna, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Climate change is undoubtedly real, and we are witnesses to its unfolding with all the characteristics of a global tragedy of the commons, if you are susceptible to be swayed by gloomy predictions. But I also believe that the climate protection and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as overall sustainable practices, hold a big opportunity and promise. So therefore, the gloomy predictions shouldn't discourage us. Engineering, sustainable product development, technological and digital innovation in the industrial sectors clearly hold the very tangible promise to help us in rising up to the challenge. Today, as an introduction to this panel session, I would like to highlight not only the challenges, finding global policies and coordinated action that enable net zero economies, but rather focus on the key strategies for the hard-to-abate sectors as well as producers of industrial equipment, goods and services. And these strategies are based on three paradigms. First, engineering and manufacturing at dramatically lower cost by using digital technologies. And let us not forget, it is about winning in a global competition under the conditions of climate change, which are real. Second, sustainability and flexibility need to be built into our industrial products by means of circular designs and technological upgrades, which are separated from the physical product. It's all about creating not only sustainable and circular products, but also digital augmented products. And then third, cross-sector alliances and digital networks, both on the demand and the supply side, to share the costs of decarbonization and therefore ease the transition to net zero. So let us jointly investigate and reflect on a couple of significant figures. Take the number of passenger cars and light vehicles in the European Union and Europe. Above 250 million units. That's quite a sizable installed base. And this installed base needs to be electrified or decarbonized with other propulsion technologies, all within the next decade. A Herculean undertaking, if you bear in mind that, assuming no disruptive technology breakthroughs, mobility alone requires large quantities of renewable electricity and charging infrastructure connected to the grid. Offshore wind generation capacity needs to be ramped up by some 250 gigawatts within a similar time frame. Connectors to the transmission grid, as well as new transmission lines, will have to be built. And that requires constructions and cabling and the purchasing and procurement of cable and construction workers. The distribution grids will have to be fortified and digitalized to carry the load of some 10 million plus EV charging stations. Heat pumps, fuel cell radiators, and other distributed energy resources, such as PV, electrolyzers for the production of green hydrogen, as well as storage units. Moreover, supply chains and manufacturing of industrial goods and equipment have to be re-engineered as well, encompassing but not limited to raw materials such as lithium, rare earths, precious metals, capital equipment, and other key technology components such as semiconductors, and last but not least, the nurturing and development of technological skills and talent of unprecedented size, scope, and specialization. And just again, if you reflect upon the 250 million passenger cars and light vehicles, if this installed base, if even a lower installed base would be fully electrified using battery electric vehicles, that means quite a lot of lithium battery packs to recycle. The cost of the overall energy transition in Europe, and obviously depending on what is included in the estimates, so some even go higher, has been calculated for Europe at a staggering 1.5 trillion euros. And just to put that in perspective, that's roughly 4 times the current GDP of Germany. And this undertaking of the energy transition and decarbonizing industry in Europe needs to be built upon new paradigms. Because if we wrongly assume that the established linear models of designing and building the required infrastructure are fit for the net zero purpose, we will end up with higher costs for enterprises and consumers, as well as oversized and stranding assets. But this can and must be avoided. And the solution lies in what we call the twin transformation of digital engineering and manufacturing. So what's meant with a twin transformation? Let us try to visualize and imagine 2 twins as personas. One of the twins, let us call her Decarbona, is exclusively focused on the future. She's active in various fields of decarbonized value creation. Always on the lookout for new friends and collaborators who will jointly imagine and employ digital technology to tap into value pools such as energy demand and supply aggregation, automated solutions for engineering, such as software robots, that draw upon vast libraries of simulation, designs and routine tasks, as well as collaborative R&D in artificial intelligence, smart products and technologies, to name only a few. And let's now turn to the other twin of the twin transformations. Let us call him Apodoticus, and that's a pun on the Greek word for efficiency. And he is obsessed with productivity and efficiency in the here and now. because climate change requires action now. And he uses the opportunities of both digital technologies and more sustainable operations to cut costs and free up funds for his sister's extravagant and costly lifestyle. No source of waste and idle resources escape his attention, and he is sure to eliminate these. You might think that this sounds like a recipe for inter-sibling conflict. Quite the contrary. The twins get along well with each other. They live in steadily increasing numbers under one roof in the leading industrial enterprises of Europe. And they share common values of building a sustainable present and future for their offspring. And both Decarbonar and Apodoticus act on the principle that value creation and societal wealth crucially depend on efficiency gains. Hence the commitment to engineer and manufacture at dramatically lower costs, meaning 10 times lower than the status quo. And let us not forget, it is about Europe, including the UK, our great friends in Great Britain. It is all about competitiveness in a global economy with fierce competitors such as China and our friends in the US. So also both Decarbonar and Apodoticus endorse the notion of modular and network designs that have sustainability built in, which means extended product life cycles for the physical products and continuous upgrades of the embedded and extended software. And lastly, they are true cosmopolitans in the sense that they share costs and profits with like-minded and extend their circles for the benefit of all. To conclude on the importance and the opportunities of twin transformations, let me share another significant number. We have analyzed the potential for the hard-to-abate sectors, and that means chemicals, metals, predominantly steel, and cement. And these sectors currently contribute up to 20% of greenhouse gas emissions, to switch to digitally enabled and commercially available lower emission technology. Over the course of the next decade, these no-regret moves, anticipating current carbon emission prices, would allow for a net value generation in Europe of 200 billion euros. And this estimate does not include yet the potential from new markets to which these technologies and services could be exported. I think that is the ulterior promise of fighting climate change with technology and innovation. So we can have reason to be optimistic despite the urgency to act now. Deployment of new technologies and innovations will be essential to support the transition to net zero economies and enterprises. And let us all embrace the opportunity. I look forward to hearing more about the great work being undertaken in the UK, and especially the digital innovations being implemented. Now handing back to Donna to guide us through the panel discussion and exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Gert. I think really well articulated the size of the challenge that's facing everybody, whether that's at home or at work, that everybody needs to actually act together. What I'd like to do now is to introduce my fellow panel members. So I'd like to introduce Ian Fennell, Chief Executive for Hitachi Energy in the UK and Ireland. Hi, Ian. Brian Holliday, Managing Director of Digital Industries at Siemens for UK and Ireland. Beth Child, Deputy Director for International Climate Change with the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And we should be joined virtually by Maddie Walker, Managing Director, leading Accenture's Industry X Engineering and Manufacturing practice in the UK and Ireland as well. So welcome everybody, and it's good to have you up on stage. If we look at the chart, there has been a chart being showed in terms of the challenge that faces us And we can see that 30% of the UK roadmap for industrial emissions reduction is to be achieved through energy and resource efficiencies. From me and the team powering on the Made Smarter adoption pilot in the Northwest, we are seeing more and more SMEs adopting technology to reduce their carbon emissions. We're also seeing technologies as a key enabler as well. It would be great to get some insights from our experienced panel members and what they're seeing across a broad range of industries and whether that 30% improvement is achievable or not. Ian, if I can come to you first. You've been a strong advocate for the adoption of digital technologies within the manufacturing sector and actively promoting the use of adoption of technology through Made Smarter. You've recently moved from demand side at ABB to the supply side at Hitachi Energy, and I know that they are very committed to sustainability. So how do you see digital contributing to achieving sustainability goals?
Thanks, Donna, and thanks to Essentia for running this panel today. I think digital is going to be absolutely essential to every part of what we do. It doesn't matter whether it's in industrial automation or in energy. It gives us a window into the future that we have not yet had. And I think if you look at what Hitachi has done, it's a very interesting organisation in many respects. It's still, in some respects, still deals with some of the very traditional industries, but around 25% now of our revenues come from digital. Mm-hmm. And with the recent acquisition of Global Logic, that's really strengthened that part. So I think everything we do now is very much focused on how to solve problems for customers in a way that has never been done before. How do you give small and large companies the information they need in order to make real positive management decisions about decarbonising their operation, whatever that operation looks like? And our keynote speaker, I think, made it very, very clear that we have to start that process now. There are things that we can do today, and the technology exists today in order to be able to do that. And for ourselves, and actually for many of our customers, 2030, which is a key milestone to making our 2050 targets, 2030 is today in our terms. The planning processes in terms of both the supply side of energy and the demand side of energy, we really have to start today if we have any hope of meeting those 2030 targets. 2050 is really next week. And I think it's a very important part of this equation that we start to look at, as I say, again, back to the keynote, the things we can do today, the technologies that we have today, get us halfway there. Electricity is going to be the backbone of the whole energy transition, exclusively or perhaps in hybrid with some other fuels. But the electricity consumption by almost every measure is going to at least double by 2050 as we start to decarbonise fossil fuels out of the energy sector. So I think there's a real drive to try and look at hybrid technologies, and of course the control of those things. Back to digital again. You need that information to be able, and the sophistication to be able to do it, because man alone cannot. And I think that, so the Hitachi journey, and we're a principal partner of COP26, and it's been fascinating to see the various ranges of debate and commitment that has gone on over the last 7 days. And I think the general consensus that we're going in the right direction, I think with one exception, and that is the exception of pace. We are not doing this quickly enough. Yeah. So I think for me, the key message in terms of how to digitalise, I think we have the answers. It's about the pace and about starting to do it now.
And it is, isn't it? It's about getting everybody on that journey.
Absolutely.
As you say, from now. What opportunities do you see digital can provide in better coordinating demand and supply of energy?
Digital plays a part everywhere in the entire value chain. And I think if you look at how to make the current assets work harder, we don't know how our assets are really performing in detail. And digital can provide that information, which enables us to extend their lives, to operate and maintain them when they need maintained, not when we determine it, but when the plant and equipment determines it, and also to optimize the efficiency of the network as a whole. And again, without that, we have built an entire infrastructure here that has been built on theoretical calculations. And there are very few opportunities in a network that is so sophisticated to actually understand whether that theoretical calculation is correct or not. Digital will enable that to happen. And I think in those terms, having the smart home and the smart car and the smart network, I hate the term smart, but to be honest, I can't think of anything that's really that much better at this stage. But a digital future that enables all this to be absolutely joined up and make decisions with the advent of artificial intelligence on our behalf. We set the criteria as business leaders, as individual homeowners, but the systems do it on our behalf.
And can give us the answers, potentially.
I hope, and can give us the answers and can make it more efficient and more cost effective. And ultimately it will be. I'm hugely optimistic. No, I expect that by the time we get to 2050, that lowest cost solution will be the carbon neutral solution. I think the journey that we're going to take along the way is going to be a bit challenging. Yeah. But I think once we get there, technology has given us everything. I mean, we're in Glasgow at the minute. Part of the Industrial Revolution started here. So why shouldn't the Green Revolution?
Absolutely. Brian, people who know you know about your passion for digitalisation within industry, and as Managing Director for Siemens Digital Industries, you're at the forefront of bringing those digital technologies to other industries and other companies to help them realise those improvements. How big is the opportunity, and where have you seen these benefits being realised?
Well, I think, Ian, you've made mention of the Industrial Revolution. Interesting that I think Industry 4.0, an idea that's 10 years old now, started with this notion that perhaps we could be 50% more productive and we could use 50% fewer natural resources. I think in the Made Smarter report, we identified about a 4.5% improvement in industrial carbon that could be achieved. And I think we've heard some estimates here around 200 billion euros for a subsector of manufacturing. I think the key is that energy efficiency is where we should be looking for that opportunity. We can invest in renewable, but if we fail to address the efficiency of industry, we will waste renewable energy in future too. So I think we've got to really look at the opportunity and energy efficiency alone at those measures, if we were to bring manufacturing up to date with current best practice in the UK, sit somewhere in the region of £2 to £5 billion at current energy costs. The sorts of technologies that make a difference in digitalisation, we've got some incredible design and simulation tools available to us now that can bring more sustainable products to market faster, better products, and we can understand their footprint along the way. We've got automation technologies in the factory that we can control energy consumption, we can understand it better, we can use high efficiency motors, we can use inverters which can reduce the cost of energy through a motor by up to 60%, and of course control systems like a light switch can help us switch machines off when they're not needed. So data is critical to understand what we're using so that we can then go ahead and control it as well. So these are some of the sort of technology areas in particular. And I think to get started, it really is a question of going and walking the floor in the factory. It's a question of engaging with experts and understanding through benchmarking, what opportunities can be addressed. And that might be lighting, it might be, different by sector based on the energy consumption. And we know certain sectors are greater than others. Glass, for example. I've seen, some benefits there through the use of inverter technology and a dramatic reduction in energy used, actually put together with a finance package that enables investment to go ahead as well. So I think, the underlying issues of addressing productivity and energy efficiency are ones of adoption, which is why, as you know, Donna, I've thrown my support behind the Made Smarter initiative in particular to try and help companies get going to address these two twins of productivity and energy efficiency.
And I think one of the challenges that I know we get from companies is that, it's easy for the big companies to do this. So how is Siemens leading by example in terms of their journey?
Well, we've made a carbon neutrality commitment by 2030. We are 54% of the way on that journey, and we're looking at our electric vehicles in deployment globally. We're looking at our buildings. We're looking at our factories. We're also working very much on the customer that we supply as well with our technologies. And, some of those are very small companies like TrackWrap, a Skelmersdale-based original equipment manufacturer, that, they're able to reduce through orbital wrapping, the energy consumed through their machine by 90%, that they're able to reduce the plastics used by 70%. And this has been enabled through a digital twin of the machine. I think they've even worked with the Made Smarter team as well. And one of our catapults here in the UK as well, the Manufacturing Technology Centre. So they've engaged with experts, and they've come up with a design for a machine that they can be confident that it works. And of course, they can then sell that on the basis that it can replace an existing energy-intensive, high plastic use, end-of-line packaging machine with one that's been derived from a digital approach. And I think these are the great examples that we've got to do more to highlight, especially because actually that can be financed again without a large capital budget, because it can be funded even from savings. So I think having a green digital twin is good business sense too.
Yeah, it's about telling those stories, isn't it, so that people understand what the opportunity is as well. So if I can come to you now, Maddie. So great to have you with us. We know Accenture's industry X-Practice is a global leader in implementing digital solutions, which have been highlighted by Brian across industry. As the UK and Ireland practice lead, what are you seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. It's nice to be with you virtually. I think the first thing to say is we are seeing a significant step change as companies are realising that sustainability isn't just the right thing to do, but also makes business sense. I think Ian's got a point, though, in that, it's all about pace. So although 63% of CEOs have set science-based sustainability targets to drive innovation, it's kind of converting the science-based targets to drive innovation into action and getting that pace there. I think what I am seeing is that when approaching their journey, companies are really considering 4 broad areas. I think firstly, it's about the decarbonisation of heat and power. So a lot of them are looking to source their power from renewable energy, either directly from the grid or through local sources. For example, the Bentley car factory in Crewe installed over about 10,000 solar panels and now produces about 7.7 megawatts of power locally. So that's pretty impressive. So that's the first thing, decarbonisation of heat and power. Secondly, we're really looking to minimise waste and focus improving the environmental impact. And I think this really comes into play when you're thinking about how you design and manufacture the products. So how do you select materials that minimise carbon, embodied carbon, and how do you optimise for ease of recycling? There's a really good example of a large window manufacturer in Germany that managed to reduce the number of prototypes from 12 to 6, which actually has some interesting knock-on impacts, which is reducing material down by 10 to 5 tons and ultimately saving, over 1,000 kilowatt in electricity. So I think these are real things that companies are trying to do. One of the things that I'm really seeing a lot about, though, and talking to a lot of people, is really how do you reconfigure that end-to-end supply chain by considering about how you source materials and where they're transported. So there's a real recognition by digital leaders that there's a need to rethink about how we build supply chains, and we're kind of calling them the 3 Rs, which is, how do you build resilient, relevant and responsible supply chains? And that's a big focus that we have in terms of what we're seeing with our customers at the moment. So you need them resilient to recover faster from disruptions, whether that's the pandemic or Brexit, relevant about how you follow demand, more flexibly at the right cost, and responsibly, which is the big point here, which is how do you do this with a positive impact on the society and the planet? And we're seeing that larger companies and manufacturers' relationships with their suppliers are really looking to fundamentally shift that focus onto responsible behaviours in the future. And we're already seeing this change. For example, at Accenture, we've set up a digital platform that manages over 100,000 suppliers and installs them on the environment, human rights, inclusion and diversity. And the really neat thing is that not only does it provide a score, but it recommends next steps based on those scores to increase responsible behaviour. So they're sort of three of the big things we're seeing. And then finally, just really to focus on operational improvement, that's a big one. Brian was talking about energy efficiency. Over the last 100 years, manufacturing companies have focused on labour productivity, and that's typically achieved about a 3% year-on-year improvement. But in today's world, we need to look at improving both energy efficiency, as Brian said, and also energy consumption. And, for example, data centres are huge consumers of power currently. I think they consume about 4% of the world electricity. And if you think about it, this is massively set to increase as computing grows by 17 to 19% a year. So what can we do about this? At the simplest level, right? It's replacing conventional lighting with LEDs, but there's other opportunities as well. So, for example, there's recent advances in material science allows semiconductors to be made out of new materials such as gallium nitride, which are physically smaller, but because they're physically smaller, they reduce power consumption in the operation and manufacture. For example, if every data center in the US adopted these chips, there would be a saving of 2 million tons of carbon dioxide alone. I mean, that's huge. And then finally, we think about energy conservation, and we've already talked about it, but this is really where we see the importance of digital technologies, which can provide the process efficiency, the predictive analytics, all the applied intelligence, moving from, what I like to say is about moving from scheduled control to intelligent control. So that's a really big topic that we're seeing. And when we're seeing it done well, we're seeing up to 60% of energy savings in buildings through better use of sensors and control systems. So if you can imagine it, a large warehouse, whether it might be in Singapore, if you can introduce the right sensors and get the right level of control, then you can reduce energy consumption. We're seeing it in the range of 30 to 40%. Or a US cement manufacturer, sorry about that, creates a digital twin through the use of automation, and it's improving energy efficiency by 20%. So I'm probably going to end where Brian spoke about too, talking about digital twin, but actually getting that end-to-end view around how you control emissions, having that sort of that thread of data to give the visibility is hugely important. So you can actually measure what you're consuming. And just one final thing to finish on before I hand back to yourself is, we did a recent Accenture study, and it found that 5 sectors, so construction, consumer packaged goods, transportation, life sciences, and electrical industries, if you just got a hold of that between now and 2030 and address the consumption alone in that area, there's an opportunity to deliver a reduction of up to 7.5 gigatons. So it's huge. They're the biggest users of energy. And so if we can just address those sectors and really work closely with them, we think we can make a massive difference. I mean, obviously what we're seeing differs by industry, but there's lots to do. And, we've got more to do in the UK, definitely, but they're the kind of conversations that we're having.
Definitely. So how can organisations start on that journey?
Yeah, so the key is to be able to track, measure, and to have the visibility, of the end-to-end energy consumption, which I just talked about in terms of the digital twin. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And we find that many companies we work with really struggle to get that clear and consistent picture of how consumption is used, sort of hour by hour, day by day within the plan. It goes back to the creation of that kind of digital thread, digital twin, to give you that end-to-end visibility. I mean, the way you do achieve that is you either have to install metering on key processes or implementing sensors that provide some real-time measurement of a multitude of manufacturing variables. But, in today's world, many of the machines are equipped with sensors and typically come as very internet enabled. Obviously, purchasing new equipment isn't always the most straightforward or economical thing to do. So what we're often doing is talking to manufacturing companies with significant legacy estates and really considering how do you retrofit the equipment with sensors to measure power and energy consumption. So that's kind of a conversation we're having a lot about. Once you've measured it, you can identify the true usage of energy, and then you basically start to model it. And you can identify trends and anomalies and work out where to investigate, and where to work out sort of root cause of where you're seeing the high energy consumption and the high spikes, and you look for the peaks and troughs, and you measure and you assess. And, we've got some really neat visual analytics tools that can be used nowadays that really can bring it to life and really enable you to do that kind of root cause analysis. And once you've done a root cause analysis, actually you can go one step further and start using data to help you predict and use predictive technologies to really get better control and to, basically automatically adjust the manufacturing processes in real time and ensure optimization real time. And then you've really got a really good grip of the end-to-end process at that point. So that's kind of the end state that we all want to get to. To bring this to life, there's probably two examples. There's a SME example. It's not just, we obviously do work a lot with the larger manufacturing organisations, but through the Made Smarter programme, we've been working with SMEs and a range of different manufacturing groups. So we've considered Beviston Engineering, which is a SME based in Knowsley in the northwest, and it manufactures components for safety critical industries such as aerospace and gas and oil. And as part of the Made Smarter initiative, it created a productivity control room, which was a big bank of 18 screens in the centre of the factory, displaying real-time factory productivity and efficiency to the workforce. And this drove a more efficient machine use, and it's been estimated to reduce annual carbon emissions by more than 10%, which is the equivalent of 18.5 tonnes. So that's kind of what we've been doing in the UK with Made Smarter, which has been great. And then secondly, I also wanted to share a case study from our partner in Nissan, who we're collaborating with Nissan plus a number of manufacturing companies to develop what we're calling smart shop floor solutions, which is funded as part of the Made Smarter Challenge innovation project. And that's really made a difference. And I think we're going to share a video of that now.
The Made Smarter team aims to deploy a smart connected shop floor vision, connecting multiple data sources, such as production processes, shop floor systems, smart tooling, and measurement devices via a data flow platform, allowing us to visualize the data in a meaningful way and helping us to make informed decisions. We're constantly adding to our data lake of cold data, which is the historical data that we're primarily using for automated reporting and analysis, and improving the flow of hot data, our real-time data, that we're gathering directly from production, which is used immediately for live decision-making. Following Nissan Sunderland's recently announced EV360 strategy, which is the combination of a new all-electric crossover vehicle, the building of a new gigafactory close to the site, and the construction of a renewable energy microgrid, the strategy to achieve net zero is well underway. We are supporting efforts to minimise wasted energy across the plant through the exploitation of digital data. The Made Smarter team were asked to develop a solution to remotely shut down and restart equipment within Paint Shop by connecting all of the equipment back to the production control room. Previously, an operator had the labour-intensive process of visiting each item of equipment one by one to carry out the manual stop-start operation. We aim to replace this slow ramp down on a Friday evening and ramp back up for Monday morning production with a near instantaneous action to minimise energy usage during the period of no production. In order to measure the effectiveness of the remote stop-start modification, we used data gathered by smart meters mounted at a switchboard level and compared the energy profiles before and after the modification. We developed a dashboard to visualise this and also translated the energy savings into pounds, which we found to be the metric with the most impact at a shop floor level. For Paint Shop alone, it was conservatively estimated that the energy savings equated to approximately £4,000 per weekend. Once the dashboard had been developed, this had the immediate benefit of being used as a tool to target specific areas and drive further improvements, such as monitoring and minimising energy use on evenings and measuring the effectiveness of equipment upgrades, such as enabling low power modes during periods of inactivity. Moving forward, we plan to support the site services team with their energy monitoring and optimisation programme, helping to roll out the concept to the other shops across the plant. We are also studying the concept of virtual meters at an equipment level, which will give a greater level of granularity. This will allow managers and team leaders to take ownership of the equipment within their areas of responsibility and be focused in their target setting, with a tool to clearly measure their success in terms of savings for the business and overall energy reduction as a zone. Hopefully, this short video shows that the exploitation of digital data can be one of the key tools in the drive towards net zero manufacturing.
Thanks for that, Maddie. It's good to actually see something visually, isn't it, in terms of the difference in that shop floor environment. I think I come to you now, Beth. And obviously we saw the 30% of the UK roadmap for industrial emissions reduction to be achieved through energy and resource efficiency. How important is digital in achieving this goal? Is the UK on track? And how is the UK government planning to ensure these targets are achieved?
Thanks, Simon. And thank you first for inviting me to kind of come and speak here. And I feel a bit of a fraud. I normally sit on the international side and spent the last week obviously in the SEC, and it's all about kind of the big market signals, the international commitments with countries and companies, net zero targets. We set commitments everywhere, finance, zero emission vehicles, renewables, and actually it's really humbling and just impressive to see that the detail, how you translate that into detail, and the seriousness and the intent and the kind of the intelligence that goes into operationalising what are otherwise high-level targets for us. So, and actually, before I came, I was reflecting on some of the most interesting conversations I've actually had over the last week, and those are very much around with those large companies, the Unilevers, the Sainsbury's, a lot of other companies, those aren't, but a couple in particular, or Skies and others, and actually, it's been really clear in those conversations. They've said how they're translating the targets. Data and digital has been absolutely crucial. And a lot of my work's on supply deforestation, and they cannot manage that without really good data and the data that allows them to have real-time decisions. So it's been really impressive and helps for me personally, and I feel humbled to understand translating big commitments into reality. And this is a big, big, big task. It is super important. We know the kind of manufacturing sector in the UK is kind of 180 billion. I think it's about 8% of GDP. And in the value chain itself, I think there was something like 5 million jobs. And with it, there's 15% of emissions. And those are not easy emissions to get rid of. This is the hard to abate sectors. And we know, and yet we know that, I think in the net zero strategy published last week, we know those emissions have to come down by 50%. But quite honestly, a lot of that technology, the deep decarbonisation, those technologies are still at an early stage. So the only way of getting the emissions down in the short term is to use what we have already at our fingertips. And that absolutely is the resource and the energy efficiency. So is it important? Yes, it's absolutely fundamental. That's kind of question one. And I suppose, and it's kind of fundamental though, government has a role in supporting and enabling people to take up those kind of opportunities for resource and energy efficiency and elsewhere. So I think absolutely, as well actually also when we're talking about small and medium enterprises, and again reflecting on some of those conversations I've had in the last week, there's also responsibility all the way up to the supply chain to support businesses in doing that. So I think, government is a key player, but it won't be surprising for me to say we're not the only player. So government, I think one of the key things which I hope is not news to you is that 315 million Industrial Energy Transition Fund, which is there absolutely to support the installation and adoption of these technologies. And that's obviously a key way of supporting businesses all the way across sectors to do that. But is that enough? I mean, if you look anywhere in Glasgow, I think you've talked about it, or Gort talked about it earlier, we need to act now and we need to act faster. And digital and data allows you to do that. I think you said that 4.5% additional. And quite frankly, we haven't, if there's anything that can help us go faster, we can't afford not to use it. So I think absolutely essential that kind of the digital and data is supported and enables us to, or is a key part of the toolbox, quite frankly, in terms of halving emissions in the next decade. I mean, even saying that still terrifies me, but that's what we have to do if we are going to keep to 2050 and to 1.5. So I think in terms of what the UK government is doing, I mean, I have borrowed from my domestic colleagues, because obviously they are much closer to this. So I think there were a few examples, if you can allow me to read them out. And then I will just kind of go back to kind of where are we on track. So as my colleagues working on this more often, they said, we're keen that you know that we're establishing new and enhancing existing regulation to drive greater efficiency improvements, including consideration of whether digitised energy management systems can provide a tailored, technology-neutral approach to overcome the challenge of regulating such a heterogeneous, why do they give me that word? You know, a diverse sector, I would say. We would seek to minimise any burdens imposed by regulation, including through the use of digital tools. We absolutely want to minimise burdens. In addition, we're aiming to support circular economy initiatives by strengthening the evidence base surrounding the development of digital and data systems to connect energy, waste and water flows from industrial sites. And I think actually that's really powerful. I spent a lot of time the last week talking about nature as well. And this is not just energy. This is energy, waste, water. But we actually also increasingly need to be looking at the kind of the broader sustainability, the nature positive even of what we are doing. Additionally, funding provided by the Transforming Foundation Industries Challenge Fund and the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund I mentioned earlier is already demonstrating how improved access to data and digital tools can improve the flow of resources with industrial processes. And one further thing they were keen that I mentioned was that to note that further research by the National Interdisciplinary, I said that correctly, Circular Economy Research Programme will also accelerate innovation in this area. So I guess, are we on track? That was your question, Donna. I mean, I look at the net zero strategy and all the work in this space as well, and the roadmaps that have been produced, and there is definitely a good plan in place. And I feel, gosh, I mean, looking at that Nissan video, looking at the kind of the seriousness by which companies around the country are taking it. Yes, so I feel confident that we can do it, and we have the technology and the know-how to make this happen. So I think we are on track, but I would caution. I'm always nervous of anything that suggests a smooth pathway. We know that these transformations, we've seen with whether it be in offshore wind or in kind of solar, we know that transformations don't go in an obvious pathway. So I think if we're assuming we can track it perfectly, that's probably a misconception. And I also think, and again, this is my personal reflection, is I think we can put the digital in, we can put the data in, but we can't forget that behind every bit of that, you absolutely need the skills and you need the people. And all of these result in decisions that people are going to be taking. So we've got to make sure that the investment in the skills and the people is there to absolutely optimise the digital technologies and the innovations that kind of so many of the industries around the table and elsewhere are leading on. So I hope that answers your question. I hope I've flagged the things that my domestic colleagues were keen that I did.
Well, I think they'll recognise all of that, so that's positive. So I think, you know, in terms of your reference, the skills there, and I think they're one of those statistics that gets banded around is it's almost, isn't it, 70% of the workforce you need for the future you already have. So it is absolutely imperative that, you know, workforces are engaged, isn't it, in that sort of transition. And I know those are the conversations we have with businesses about how do they take their workforce with them, and actually some of the skills they need are already there, they just don't know. Yeah. So once you start to engage them, then things start to obviously change, hopefully more quickly. So do you think that programmes like Made Smarter have a part in achieving those ambitions?
Well, absolutely, and sorry, a reflection on the skills thing, I was slightly, just before I answer that, there was someone was telling me that you can get an offshore oil and gas worker, it takes them a week to learn to work on offshore wind. So the skills, as you say, the skills are there. It's just about then kind of repurposing some highly kind of skilled people into new areas and to great jobs. Yes, but I think it's not only can, it is. And there were these great examples from, I think, from Donna, something you were involved in, which was the kind of pilot programmes from the Northwest. And I think, again, those examples, what was it? I think kind of actually in the Northwest, was it 25% already showed carbon emissions reductions and 50% resource efficiency. So I think Made Smarter is probably already, as the pilot suggests, and already making a big difference there. And there were a couple of examples. Maddie, you gave some examples to bring it to life. And again, I think there's a couple. In Bolton, there's a manufacturer, I think, of advanced materials using Made Smarter, who kind of adopt digital technology to manage their production data. And absolutely kind of that resulted in 20% efficiency. So I think it's great Made Smarter's here. I think it's already making a difference. And it actually, the ability to expand it is fantastic. And again, I think there are a couple of things. I'm hoping people here and online are aware of other innovations and other work government is doing, because there's opportunities for people to apply. So there's the Made Smarter Innovation Challenge programme. That's got 147 million to it. And it's open to manufacturers across the UK to get involved. And I think there's actually a competition that is live now for smart factories, and I think there's an ask that anybody here who is interested in that and if they are a UK registered business or organisation, they can apply to that. So yes, it is making a difference. We've obviously extended it, and I guess our interest is what more can we do. We try and listen and respond, but if there's more we could be doing, I'm sure you'll tell us. But please do tell us.
Do you have any comments on that, Brian?
Maybe just to comment that you could have made mention too of the funding that government put into the catapults, and in particular the high value manufacturing catapult, which has 7 front doors with expert institutions here in the UK to go and have a conversation about how do you deploy digital and how can you improve in decarbonisation terms. So you've mentioned Made Smarter, but I guess maybe just one ask from industry. You've mentioned IETF. But I think industry really does need those always-on initiatives, not those that are not so clunky to access, like patent box, R&D tax credits, that make it really easy, perhaps less clunky for companies to be able to come and make use of funding to help start a journey where we know there's a benefit to the climate as well.
Yeah, and I think for the Made Smarter, the pilot was in the Northwest, but actually there are now West Midlands, North East and Yorkshire and Humberside where there is that support available for SMEs to engage with if they're not sure. There is no such thing as a stupid question, is there, in this space? It's ask it, and then hopefully somebody will begin to find an answer for you.
But I think that's a really good point as well, though. It's not just initiatives, it's about the incentives across the kind of chain need to be lined up as well, so
Yes.
I hear that.
Yeah. It's a confusing space, isn't it? And lots of places you potentially can go, but you need somebody to help guide you on that.
Yeah,
navigate it. Yeah. And whether that's suppliers in your supply chain as well as all the other initiatives that you can potentially engage with. It's just go and ask that question, isn't it? So, Ian, did you want to add anything?
Probably just a couple of things. A great summary. I think nobody's got the answer for this. None of us, not policymakers, not business, not anybody. And there is I think a cultural thing. You mentioned the regulators as well. I think their role is clearly key in this. And I think the way in which they currently regulate, i.e. in terms of investment of no regrets, is not practical in a space where we're moving into something where there's an inherent risk. Yeah. And I think moving the culture to one of perhaps low regrets as opposed to no regrets changes the mindset significantly. In business, we're used to starting things, seeing if they work. If they work, great, we just invest behind them. If they don't work, we fail fast and move on. And arguably offshore wind, which is the UK's biggest success story, started that way. So we shouldn't be afraid to do that, and we know that every dollar is not going to to give us a return, and therefore we have to have the mindset, I think, that perhaps does that. And so no company, no organisation is going to come up with this answer. So partnerships, I think, also are extremely important in this, and partnerships particularly with the policymakers and industry. I think because that collaboration is much better than simply people sitting on their own. And perhaps I think the whole exercise of consultation is one of these things that has sped up a lot. I think if you look at the transmission review at the minute, Ofgem are moving very, very quickly, relatively to where they used to be, but we need to move even faster. So I think, again, let's try things, let's pilot them. If they work, invest behind them. If they don't, let's cut it and run.
I think that's really interesting. Also, you may not have seen that we launched a series of kind of called Glasgow Breakthroughs last week, which have very clear. It's about kind of countries, but kind of corporates and companies all coming behind a common goal and actually saying a goal for 2030, whether it's on kind of green steel or hydrogen or vehicles, and saying this is what we're aiming to. We want this to now be the cheap, affordable option by 2030, and that's about saying we are going to work together, we're going to innovate together, we're going to make mistakes together, but we are ultimately going to get to 2030 together. So I think that's been quite a powerful
it's great.
Approach.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, I think we've now got an opportunity for the audience to sort of participate. So for those of you joining us virtually, you will see a link to a code where you can answer 3 quick questions on Menti. So you should be seeing that now. For those of you in the audience, then you'll see the questions come up on the screen as well. So I think, thank you for the insights from the panellists today. We could go on for hours, I'm quite sure. But obviously, we have a limited amount of time this afternoon. So actually, I'd also be interested in hearing the panel's view as the questions appear on the screen. So the first question that we have is, which manufacturing sector do you see having the greatest opportunity to reduce emissions through the application of digital solutions? So,
every single one of them. Simply. I think everybody can benefit. I mean, the very, very small manufacturers in the early days of Made Smarter, we went through exactly the same thing. You can start in a very simple, cost-effective way and get enough information to be able to make a difference.
I mean, where we're using technology to move things, heat them, cool them, it is industry, it's broad. And I think I would just add glass to the list that I think Gertz had started with, where, of course, Accenture have done some work to look at these high energy consumers. So there are tremendous opportunities. But I really like, actually, Beth, that you covered sustainability beyond just energy as well. And I think we've got to look at digitalisation, beyond just energy efficiency and into, the sort of applications where we can really start to use AI and start to predict things. And Maddie mentioned this as well. Great example, just a quick mention of Yorkshire Water now using AI to predict flooding incidents. But of course, there are benefits to not sending resources out to sites that don't need it and so on as well. So we've got to look left and right of industry for the benefits.
Yeah, and I think, what we're seeing is that from the audience participation, then energy is the sector where, 40% of you are saying that's the sector that we could actually see the biggest benefit. And you can see on the screen now in terms of transport and construction. So probably no surprises in terms of those sectors. But yeah, you're right, everybody can make a contribution.
Well, it's interesting. It was Energy Day last week at COP, and it's going to be Transport Day this week. So yes, I think all are represented. Yeah,
so we're on message. So that's good. Any surprises for you there, Maddie?
No, not really. I think the electronics and the electrical industry as well is probably definitely one that I would add. That's what we saw. We saw the 5. We saw consumer packaged goods, which is really food. A lot of that kind of component. We saw transportation, life sciences, construction, which was on there. And then, the only one that wasn't, I think, is based on what we saw when we did our survey, was the electrical and electronics industry. I mean, that's quite a big one internationally and globally at the moment in terms of what we're seeing there, which would have an impact.
Yeah. So it's one to add to the list then. So if we go to the second question, so what are the key barriers to adopting digital solutions that facilitate emission reduction?
For me, if I can start, I think there's that inertia to make the first step.
Yeah.
I think that's always the most difficult one, no matter how small the step is. Making a transition, particularly in smaller organisations, where you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think without support and without help, like organisations like yours, I think it makes it very, very difficult. I think with the right level of support, and you know better than all of us, it's been a fantastic journey for many organisations. But many organisations are struggling where they are, particularly in the current climate. It's very, very difficult to step out of that, business sort of round circle and break out and try and do something new.
Yeah. And I guess it also, it requires investment, doesn't it? And that's not, you've got to have access to finance to make that upfront investment as well, which must be kind of, when business is tight, that's not an easy thing to find.
Yeah, and the challenge is that, it's that focus, isn't it? That actually by doing this, you actually can almost pay for itself.
Yeah.
If you do it in the right way, in the right order.
But there's a temporal gap, isn't there?
There is. Yeah. It's that fear, isn't it, of the unknown. You can see when they're doing that. So obviously mandatory standards is one that they're saying could be more effective. In terms of government intervention around, then obviously mandatory standards is a mechanism that will actually start to drive some of that change as well. So in terms of what would the most effective government intervention be to support rapid adoption, to facilitate emission reduction, what would you say that would be?
Well, I think rolling out Made Smarter nationally would be great for adoption activities. Focus on skills, industry, of course, will consistently report this skills gap. Lack of knowledge of the benefits to make a start it is key, but so is skills. And I think working with industry on, the vocational education system in particular, leaning more towards sustainability in what we do. And hopefully that will be supported by private sector finance, with capital being perhaps allocated more towards sustainability projects, with a little bit of encouragement from government too, maybe.
And I was personally quite struck that on Friday there was a youth day at COP, and actually for the first time our education ministers for the first time ever they've been to COP, and the first time the finance minister's been to COP, to be fair. And actually it feels to me, and I've worked in kind of climate change a long time now, it feels like there is a kind of really much deeper integration now. And I think that idea of green skills, and actually these are the industries of the future, and you need the people of the future with those skills to service them. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it is about a partnership, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of doing that. So were there any surprises in any of those barriers for anybody? No.
Not really. It looked very sensible to me. And I think back to Beth's point, the thing that COP has done this time round, I think, is brought every sector together. And I think when you look at some of the meetings I've had about literally trillions of dollars that are available, I think maybe the one thing that hasn't been unlocked yet is really the pension fund piece, which is, I think, and it's not about giving them incentives, it's negating the disincentives more than anything else, so that pension funds can then invest behind, because, and I don't know what the number is, but you're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars available to make those sorts of investments.
But then industry, has to do a better job of helping, to your point, financiers seeing what a good investment is. So that is an industry role as well, to support government.
And I think actually, and looking at, I think you're actually absolutely right. The volumes of finance out there, whether it be internationally or kind of within companies, the finance exists. It's about how do you make sure they are being incentivised in the right direction and away from the other. And governments do have a role there in helping that. So, but absolutely right. It's not necessarily new money. It's making sure the money goes in the existing money goes in the right places.
Yeah, well, it is that partnership, isn't it, in terms of giving people the knowledge so that they know where to go and what to do, but then how they get the resources behind them to do that. So I think that, it's, but we're all on a journey, aren't we? So it's, I think that's something that we are seeing across all the businesses that we're working with, that giving them that knowledge and insight, it can provoke a real change that's positive. once they've done that, and all those case studies give other people the confidence about they can do it too. They see people like them doing it. So that's the bit that makes the difference.
And at some point, because the question was about how do you accelerate it, and I see people put back about, you can obviously use regulation or standards to accelerate it. And what's been really interesting recently, I think, with those, I don't know if people have noticed, the carbon transition plans were announced this week, and that was businesses asking for that. So actually, if businesses want standards and they demand it, then absolutely that can be a useful tool. Obviously, no business wants regulation that they don't ask for.
Indeed.
It's always a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Exactly.
So thank you for that. So, hello, Jürgen.
Oh, hello there. Great to see you all. Hi, Donna.
Hi. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Jürgen. I understand you've had to stay in Manchester today, and I hope that you're well and appreciate that you are sort of beaming in direct from home. We've heard compelling evidence today about how technologies can make a big difference, and importantly, how it can make a difference in the near term. As you've seen from the audience feedback, these are the industries, these are the blockers, and this is where industry needs support. So as a key architect in Made Smarter and co-chair with government, what's your vision and what would your ideal roadmap be to a digital future?
Well, thank you, Donna, and I'd say one of the architects. The architects are actually all on your stage here today, and thank you to everybody for your support on Made Smarter, and especially yours, Donna, for the leadership that you've shown on the pilot that you've been talking about in the Northwest. And thanks for the question, and sorry I can't be with you. Well, look, it's been a great session. And I've loved some of the very practical examples of what can be done by manufacturers to reduce their energy efficiency, improve their manufacturing optimization. I love the Nissan example, and I mean, it goes back a long way since I was running manufacturing plants, but I always remember that temptation to leave your paint plant on for the weekend, because you knew if you didn't, it just wouldn't work properly on the Monday morning when you came back in. But here we are in a different scenario where with digital technology you can make sure that when you do get it back up, it is as perfect as when you turned it off on the last shift on Friday. And it's those sorts of technologies and some of the ones that Brian talked about that are really helping people reduce their carbon emissions. Now, what you've also discussed is that companies need help. And I did find it quite interesting that at COP last week, there was this announcement from our Chancellor and from Mark Carney saying that large companies now need to demonstrate and have plans of how they're going to become carbon neutral. But of course, we know that, to be honest with you, most large companies are now finally on this journey, and especially the ones in the room here today of Accenture, Siemens and Hitachi. And the people that really need help are the small to medium-sized enterprises, and that's where Made Smarter comes in. And my vision for Made Smarter is that we now work to really scale what we have been doing. We've piloted the adoption programme in the Northwest very successfully. Thank you, Donna. We've now received a further 24 million to scale it up in the West Midlands, Yorkshire and the Northeast. It's a start. It's not enough. And we'd like to see an even stronger partnership. Ian Fennell talked about partnerships, and that's so important. And we'd like to work with you, Beth, and your teams to make that partnership so much stronger, so that Made Smarter becomes the lead programme to help small to medium-sized companies improve their energy efficiencies. And the second vision is that as people are adopting more technologies, whether it's whether it's simulation, whether it's robotics, whether it's inverters that Brian was talking about, that more of that technology is made and created in the UK. Sadly, at the moment, we import far too much of that technology, and we'd like more manufacturers, more tech startups, more companies involved, and that's where the Made Smarter innovation program comes in, which Donna, you mentioned, and Beth, you previously mentioned. And so it's those two elements, scaling Made Smarter adoption and the creation of more innovation of the technologies here in the UK.
Any further comments?
Can't answer that.
As Jürgen always says, he's well tuned into this and knows it intimately. So, good summary, Jürgen.
I agree with Jürgen.
Yeah, and it is those two things, isn't it? It's that innovation piece and the adoption piece, and it's how large and small organisations work together, and the challenges that large companies have that small companies with their agility can actually help solve some of those. So it's that almost virtuous circle about everybody working together, and as you say, it does feel more joined up than it has done, I suppose, for a long time, really, in terms of that common goal that people are focusing on. So that's when you can start to make a real difference, isn't it? And give confidence to people that they can do that. So, you know, it's been great to see these things start to come together. And thanks for your leadership on all of this, Jürgen. You know, you're tireless in terms of your advocacy of what everybody's trying to do and what we're all starting to achieve. So that's great. So I think I have one final question for you, Brian. Oh. So, that, you know, we've talked about technologies, data analytics, cloud computing, sensors have been mentioned. And obviously the real benefits of digital technologies when they're managed. So what's the key combinational technologies that will make a real difference? Because it isn't one thing that seems to do it.
No, and I think, I mean, you've mentioned ecosystems, and I think, you know, technology combinations are just as important, actually. Maddie mentioned, you know, the Nissan example, and by implication, if you can't measure it, you can't control it, you can't improve it. So sensors are no good without control. Cloud technologies, of course, which we accept in the world of information technology, we now are accepting in industry as a secure platform where we can not just land data but exploit it. But cloud needs to be used in conjunction with sensor or edge-based technologies. Those two really very much need to sit together. And I would say when it comes to sustainable product design, you know, we're really now making great progress on generative design together with additive layer manufacturing. So that means being able to design things that perhaps look more biological in their form, use less materials when we make them, and actually have, you know, better products, things that we couldn't machine in the past, but we can today print. So, you know, it's really worthwhile, I think, going to those experts to have those conversations about the art of the possible today, because it might be something that, you know, you really hadn't thought of, or it might be a combination of something you can add to something you're doing already with a conventional control system that could really bring additional value. So that there is something in ecosystems and in combinational technologies that help you further digitalise.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see some of that with the universities, aren't you? And I know where we've used internships, and graduates either who are currently studying, who have left university now, are actually going into companies and making a real difference where they've got that sort of those native digital skills that aren't necessarily in the smaller companies, and then they're sort of going in very sceptically at the start, and then actually most of the internships we've placed have been offered jobs in those small companies because they now understand the benefit of employing somebody with that skill set. So, and it is where, you know, those convergence, isn't it? Things cross over, that the change can happen quite quickly.
With a data thread.
Yeah. So it's, Ian, do you have any views on that?
I think Brian summarised it perfectly. Thank you.
Maddie?
Brian summarised it very well. I think if you can't measure, it's like I said before, is if you can't measure it, you can't decide what to do with it. I think there's I think the art of product design, product simplification, that is a big one that we need to think about end to end as well. So yeah, really great conversation, really interesting.
Yes, as I say, we could go on, couldn't we? So does anybody wish to add any other sort of comments that feel we've missed anything that would be insightful for people?
I think I'd just like to repeat, I thought Ian's point at the beginning that 2030 is actually today was really powerful, and it kind of, this is we are and you are all doing things today because we can't wait 10 years. So that I just reflect on what a good comment that was.
Yeah. No, and it is, isn't it? It's when the clock, isn't it? We're a minute to midnight. Is the other one that he quoted quite a lot as well.
I'm not sure I like the minute to midnight thing. It's one of these things, and so some of the rhetoric out of COP in the early days about digging our own graves, I don't think is particularly helpful. But it's but the pace piece, I think, is just we just have to keep it that, because we can do it and we can start it now.
Yeah, and it must. We have to, don't we? That's the bit that's clear, and that's what feels different. I think in terms of that sort of joined up agenda that we all have, and why conversations like this are so important for people to engage with. Jürgen, any final comments from you?
Yes, I think it's what you were just discussing there, which is, by scaling what we're doing with Made Smarter, and by now doing this not just in the Northwest but across the regions, what we do is we learn from each other as we scale up. So, the West Midlands, Yorkshire can learn from the great work you've been doing in the Northwest. And then what we do is we don't constantly reinvent the wheel. And what we also don't do is we keep having, little initiatives in all sorts of regions, which are all a bit subscaled and not really having the impact we want them to have. And that's the whole sort of reason why we want to get Made Smarter to be national, truly repetitive, where we're just sort of, we're repeating what we're learning, and then you can accelerate the pace at which lots and lots, thousands, hundreds of thousands of SMEs are able to get on this journey much faster.
Yeah, and that's what we're all aiming to do, isn't it? To advocate the change that can be achieved by all businesses as well. So I think I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and panel members, both present in Glasgow and virtually. So it's been great to have that conversation. And obviously, the bit that comes through for me is about that public-private sector working together on a common goal, and also it's relevant to large and small businesses. And I think, productivity, efficiency, energy efficiency and conservation are some of the key things I think came out from, Gert's presentation at the start, came through in Maddie's and through the conversation. So it's all of those things being completed and achieved in tandem, really. So we're back to digital twins again. And we are seeing more companies starting to use that sort of approach to how they are manufacturing. So I think, and we want programmes that are always on. And I think this is a conversation that will continue. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to Accenture for pulling this together to enable that to happen. So thank you.